All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Structured Insights, the podcast from Structured that we go beyond buzzwords and we talk real stories, real insights around technology, AI, automation, infrastructure, cybersecurity, all those things that are important day to day in the lives of people like us. So welcome back, Bill. We definitely have had our share of great conversations of late, and today will be no different. We're going to be talking automation.
I think
one of your favorite topics, right?
automation and AI are near and dear to all of our clients' hearts, and I'm certainly excited to talk about what Juniper brings to the table in this scenario.
Yeah, I think like my theme today is going to be it's when the network becomes your smartest employee.
I like that. I like that.
All right, so let's jump into it. So, when we think about automation, and obviously we are going to dig into Juniper specifically a little bit here, but what does it really mean from an automation? Like we think about, like, forget the speeds and feeds, like what does automation really mean in a business in today's network?
Yeah, I think most organizations are trying to figure out how to provide better automation in their network stack, and I think that comes in a couple different flavors. I think automation really is around getting rid of those mundane tasks as it relates to the network. So day-to-day operations, day-to-day monitoring, troubleshooting, and configuration. Those are kind of the big low-hanging apples there to go pick when it comes to the network.
When you think about, what's the most visible in a network? I mean, to me, it jumps in. I think Wi-Fi, right? I mean,
Mhm.
when I think of the access and either an enterprise or just retail or wherever you're at, like it also seems to be, I think sometimes like the dumbest part of the network, right?
No, I think that's a very fair point because the network is a utility to 99.5% of the world out there. From a user expectation standpoint, we just expect the network to run. I don't really care whether it's wireless, wired, etc. The network needs to run so I can get to my applications. You hit the nail on the head that I think Wi-Fi is probably one of the most ripe areas of need for automation because Wi-Fi is finicky. And although it's very simple, it's just airwaves in the air and my device connects and everything works. The technology is extremely complicated and troubleshooting is extremely complicated because I'm dealing with not only potentially server application side issues, potential network issues, and end user device and client issues. And so being able to quickly assess if a user is having problems while they're connected to Wi-Fi, I need to be able to quickly assess where that problem exists. And I think that was one of the core kind of tenets of what Mist brought to the table, and why Juniper made that acquisition, because using their back end AI and troubleshooting engine Marvis, it's able to provide you insights real quickly to say, does this look like it's a client side issue? Does it look like it's maybe a problem with the network port that AP is plugged into? Or does it look like that problem is further upstream at the application or server layer?
To that point, I mean, maybe help explain how we've moved in this Wi-Fi space from what I would consider observability to predictability, right? And with technology, because you mentioned a lot of what observing all this stuff, but how has that changed?
Well, I think that it's changed in a couple ways. I mean, one, I would say that for most of our organizations, enterprises, right, 50+% of the devices that are on the network are connected to the wireless. And 10 years ago, yeah, 10 years ago and some organizations are even more, but 10 years ago it was a lot of wired, right? My desktop, even my laptop was wired into the network, and wired is, I would say, pretty predictable outside of the occasional issues that do arise. Wired network is very predictable. Wireless is very subjective, is highly susceptible to interference from other wireless neighbors. If I'm in an office building, for example, with shared tenants, it's very sensitive to how far I've walked away from a certain AP or trying to switch to another one, and it's very sensitive to the clients that are connecting to it. And so in the previous world of kind of observability, it was really hard to achieve good observability of kind of the wireless and that packet going all the way from
Hmm.
the device to the server. Network operators had to go and run troubleshooting tools and pull point in time or sometimes real-time data, and then munge and pour through that data and look for it. And as with any IT help desk problem, right? When IT is looking at it, the device is performing fine 99% of the time. And so kind of having that, you can think of like what Juniper Mist does is provide this like network video recorder of real-time troubleshooting and monitoring with the intelligence of AI alerting to you when it thinks it sees a problem or where it sees a problem. So I can quickly go to point in time and as a network operator, do my investigations much more quickly. And so by being able to be much more proactive in the monitoring and troubleshooting, I'm minimizing that feel of performance or predictability that my users expect.
You're basically you're reducing the number of dashboards they have to look at and just trying to get less incidents have to manage themselves, right?
Yeah, I it's much better if the network operator can tell an issue's coming before they get a help desk call from the user with their laptop.
Well, I mean, when we think about the metrics there, right? Metrics of measuring performance have obviously changed, and from the observability to predictability, is there a metric that in that automation view we should be looking at, and like what is it? Like how should we be looking at KPIs now?
I think that when it comes to the network, I think that I guess the what I'd say is maybe the KPIs or the expectations haven't really changed. They've always been really high. I think that by deploying modern solutions like Mist, it allows an organization to actually achieve those very high KPIs and metrics, because there are so many variabilities when it comes to wireless performance. At the end of the day, all an organization really wants is a good user experience and a good outcome. And if a user's web page takes an extra second to reload, that's not a big issue. If it's taking 20, 30 seconds to reload, that's when it becomes a problem. So, I mean, I think one benefit that wireless and like cellular telephony has given us is I think it gives a little bit better margin for error on the performance of our network than maybe we once had 10 or 15 years ago. But at the same time, because of that, the tolerance for downtime or significant performance issues, that threshold is much higher. So maybe where I said just to try to draw fun numbers, the KPI for uptime and performance was 95% previously, and we were just hitting 80%, but it was consistent. Now the expectation is 94 to 96%, and the variance is much lower. And so I have to deploy a network that I know is predictable and is going to perform and provide that outcome that user is looking for.
You brought up the user experience, which is obviously a term and phrase a lot is rampant in our industry. How does this use of AI, use of technology like Mist, how does that change the user experience or the conversations between the technical teams and the business teams? And not to say technical's not business, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's the two sides of the coin, so to speak, in an enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that especially as we look kind of post COVID in hoteling, hot desking, and hybrid work, the expectation for the business is that the network is highly scalable, highly flexible, and supports high amounts of mobility and delivers that same user experience. So whether it's an executive, a salesperson, a technical person traveling, coming into the office, or spending time here 24/7, again, the expectation is that by the business is that the network is up and that it's running all the time and that their users can get to their applications in the cloud. And when there's an issue with that user experience getting to an application, the business is expecting the network operator team to be able to identify and troubleshoot and remediate that problem extremely quickly. And that speaks back to the problem with the legacy kind of network stack was I had to maybe telnet into the device, pull some stats, load up Wireshark, try to look at the packets that were going, blah, 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 blah. Well, with something like the Mist Cloud Console, I get to see end to end of my wired, my wireless, my entire network, and what the overall health is. So again, when it comes to mean time to resolution of troubleshooting a performance issue, because let's face it, they're networks, they always break. We don't know why, but they do sometimes. That's an expectation. But a 4-hour mean time to resolution of a network performance issue is not acceptable to the business. The business expects minutes, and that's kind of back to that kind of the SLA and the KPIs that I'm thinking about. That window keeps getting really, really, really small and narrow on what the business and the end users expect. And so I have to deploy a solution that my network operators can respond to quickly and efficiently and resolve issues. And I think you take the advent of AI on top of that Mist Cloud Console, that's where the real value comes, because the AI knows how to go proactively remediate some of those issues. One example that we were talking about recently is with think of your physical security vendors, your cameras, right? Those are now IP connected. So if I've got an IP camera that's plugged into a network switch port, and maybe it's you're seeing loss, jitter, problems on that link and that connection, one of the first things to do that would be easiest would be to maybe reboot that camera, right? When in doubt, reboot. That's always the first troubleshooting. Well, what if the AI engine could detect that and see, I'm seeing packet loss, this is an IP camera, this is a critical infrastructure access, or I'm going to send an alert, a critical infrastructure asset, I'm going to send an alert and bounce that camera, reboot it, and then report back if it's still having issues. Did that solve the problem or did it not? That required no intervention. That whole process took 1 minute. That happened before that tech could even go and look at the trouble ticket, see that there was an issue. And I think that's a great use case of the AI using its intelligence to go, I see a problem here. I might have an easy fix to see. And then if it doesn't, now I'm going to start setting off the fire alarms that we're continuing to have problems and calling the troops to come troubleshoot further.
Do you think that's a great example, by the way? I mean, think about where cameras are these days. It's obviously they're ever present. When we think about the architecture, because automation affects architecture across the board, right? So is putting automation in an architectural choice or also a cultural issue within the business?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that automation really comes in handy when we look at, we talked about the network being a utility, being plumbing, and like any utility, it is actually really complex behind the scenes. And to achieve the level of redundancy and performance that we expect out of today's wired and wireless networks, the underlying protocols and how that's run has gotten much, much more complex than it was 10, 15 years ago when it comes to networking. So that complexity introduces complexity for the network operators running the network. It induces complexity in the architecture and engineering, and it introduces complexity into the troubleshooting. So by using automation and AI tools, I'm able to reduce the complexity of the deployment piece using automation, and it's going to go make a whole bunch of really complex underlying configurations to the network stack for me using, common language. And then again, back to the troubleshooting piece, again, layering AI on top of that to help me with the troubleshooting. So I'm not having to as a network operator, not having to dive into the underpinnings. And I'm really just focused on delivering the world-class outcome that my users expect.
And not to say that, companies use good marketing to position themselves, but I think obviously when you think about AI and you think about Wi-Fi, there's a lot of people out there that talk about their AI approach to wireless. And I'm curious, when you think about Juniper and Juniper Mist and their AI approach, how does their technology and their application differ from maybe other people that talk about AI?
I think one of the differences is really the fact that Mist was built from the ground up as an AI ops platform. So they are a, relatively new player to the, call it the wireless scene versus some of their other competitors. And they were built from the ground up as AI. They had a tremendous team of AI developers that helped develop Marvis. So by being developed as an AI ops platform from the ground up, I think they had an advantage. I would say that pretty much all of the network players have elements of AI that they have introduced into their cloud managed wireless solutions. And with technology is a leapfrog game, right? And so people constantly are catching up, surpassing, falling back behind, et cetera. But usually when you see a technology that was built from the ground up a certain way, there are, they're typically leading the pack more often than they're not. And I think when you think about what I look at how quickly that they were able to integrate Juniper's other products into the Mist platform when they acquired Mist. That was really telling to the power of that underlying Mist platform, because they were able to get, for example, their switching platforms and now their secure router platforms enabled in that Mist cloud. And I think that speaks a lot to how that platform was developed and built from the ground up, and bring all of the same operational benefits that Mist brought to their wireless capability to the rest of the Juniper portfolio.
I've asked you this question before in other pods, but I think it's always relevant when you think about the topic of automation, and especially how it goes all the way up to the edge. If you're talking to the CEO, not the CISO, the CEO or the CFO, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them for them, things that they need to consider now in 2025?
I think that I think there's two key points when they, especially I think at that higher level executive level, they are very much thinking about that network as a utility. It needs to run, it needs to be on, it needs to be highly resilient, it needs to not fail, and it needs to deliver on the performance expectations. So I think by sharing with them that by moving to a platform-based approach with a single vendor, cloud managed, with these AI operation tools, is going to deliver on that outcome that they want. You can build networks with multiple vendors. You can build networks and multiple solutions. I can layer other automation solutions on top of my network to make it more efficient. But especially when I think about my campus and my edge access wired and wireless network, using a single platform with the right cloud managed tools, with the right AI enabled troubleshooting and automation operational feature sets, that's what's going to allow their network operators and their IT teams to deliver on that outcome of a highly resilient, highly performant utility that is the network.
Good advice, everybody. Thanks again, Bill. Obviously, lots more we could talk about around automation and AI, but I think, obviously the true value in all this is understanding that it's not just technical, right? It's transformational, and it does connect a lot of the dots. So thank you again for the insights. Thank you for Juniper Networks for sponsoring today's conversation. And again, wherever you get your podcast, please check out Structured Insights, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.